Welcome to the Marriage Puzzle Podcast with Julie and Thomas Hobby. We are marriage coaches who help couples with pain points about money, intimacy, and communication go from being overwhelmed to being secure in their marriage.
If this is your first time listening to us, thanks for checking out our podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and a review. Let's dive into this episode. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. We have Matt and Jen with us from Intimate Covenant today. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Our pleasure.
Yeah,
thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. Sorry that the lovely Julie's not with you, but we're excited to talk to you.
We'll have to schedule another one sometime when she can actually be on as well, but I know she's listening in, so this will be fun. Normally, it's been interesting the last couple of episodes to not have her here. I mean, I did one by myself, which was really strange. I guess I like to hear myself talk more than I thought I did. I did one with my boys, and that was fun. So, but you know, it's definitely a change right now, but we're excited to have you guys, and thank you for joining us. And just for anybody who's new who might be listening, my wife Julie is currently in the hospital awaiting the birth of our baby, and our fourth baby, and so don't get me wrong, I'm not just kind of skipping out while she's in active labor and recording podcasts. She is 25 weeks pregnant out of 40, and so she is they're just awaiting go time. So we're reaching out to a bunch of our friends in the marriage community and just trying to get some help. And Matt and Jen jumped in full willing and said, we will absolutely help out getting some content out. So we really appreciate you guys for doing this. And I want to give an opportunity for you guys to just tell a little bit about yourselves and what is Intimate Covenant? Why the name? You know, where did it all get started?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question. I think we both ask ourselves that question on a daily basis.
Right.
How did we get into this?
Yeah.
We Matt and Jen have been married for 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, just under 25 years.
Yeah. In July, we'll celebrate our 25th wedding anniversary.
Much of that time was spent in a lot of disarray and with barriers between us and a lot of struggles and brokenness. And we came into the marriage with a lot of brokenness. We kind of brought that with us, but fortunately somewhere along the way, we discovered a path to breaking down some of those barriers and just found a deeper relationship.
Right.
And so from that experience, we just could not share that. And we wanted that for everybody that we knew. Mm-hmm.
We like Matt alluded to, we started in a broken place. I had been sexually abused by an extended family member my entire childhood, and was out of that situation when I met Matt, but obviously extremely wounded. I had not received any kind of professional counseling to really help me begin that healing journey. So entered marriage with that between us, which certainly, was just a whole lot of baggage, a whole lot of brokenness. A lot of wounds that, he knew of my abuse, but we really did not have the tools to really know how to deal with that. And so we were trying, but also hurting one another in the process of trying. And really that's kind of was our story for right at 19 years of marriage. Took us a long time to finally get to the point where we realized things had to change.
Yeah, it's not that we had a terrible marriage or a bad marriage. We probably had a good marriage by a lot of standards, but we knew that there was something better for us. We just couldn't get out of our own way to get there.
Right.
Too afraid of vulnerability, too afraid of getting into the depths, too afraid of revealing ourselves to one another, too afraid to even see ourselves.
Right. So often, you think, what I went through was horrible, but I'm in a loving relationship now. And if I just don't think about it, it'll go away. Mm-hmm. And that's not the truth. Trauma doesn't just go away.
Right.
I had built a lot of walls and barriers that when I was a young girl kept me safe, but didn't serve well in an intimate relationship like marriage.
Right.
And so thankfully, Matt was willing to just keep on knocking on that wall until finally I decided to peek through. And then brick by brick, that wall came down. I did receive professional counseling. We went together and I went separately, which was tremendous for the health of me, myself, and of our marriage. And really everything changed after that. And Intimate Covenant was born.
Well, we both became more solid individually. And so then we were much more capable and willing then to share and to involve one another and to reach a much greater depth of relationship.
Yeah, we've always been the people that love teaching and love mentoring. And when we desperately needed mentoring ourselves, we thought we were helping others. Maybe we were a little bit, maybe not. But really what came out of the path we had walked was that realization that, if we could provide a healthier walk for others, we wanted to be that light. And really, Intimate Covenant kind of started out as just a Bible study. I mean, we've approach everything very much from a faith-based standpoint. And we had a handful of friends that just wanted to, hey, you guys seem to talk more freely about marriage than other people we've encountered. So let's all get together and just really dive into what does God have to say about marriage? And, what are we missing as a church? And that's kind of where it all started. And it was just an 8-week Bible study. We thought 2 couples would show up. 20 did.
Wow.
And we went, oh.
And then when we finished the Bible study, we thought we were finished.
Yeah.
And
I was like, that was fun. We're done.
And people kept asking, when are we going to do this again? And when can we talk about some of these other things? And how can we do this in a different way? And
right.
So then they talked us into doing a retreat where we kind of got together and we spent the weekend at a hotel and we gave some presentations and we thought, well, that was fun. And
right.
then they convinced us to do that again. And so now that's an annual thing. And then they talked us into doing a podcast. So how hard could that be, right? So now exactly. So now we have this weekly commitment as you do, and
word spread. I mean, that original 8-week Bible class, other area churches and small groups heard about it, found out about us, and wanted that for their own selves and their own groups. And so we taught that here locally, but then it became. And we had the marriage retreat starting here locally, and then word kind of started getting out, and people wanted us to travel, and so we now will go. We've been blessed to go all across the country and hold weekend marriage days and kind of seminars, and so that's been a lot of fun. And definitely, if you had asked me 10 years ago, would you see yourself? This would not be where I would see myself.
That's great. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned, it sounds like there's a little bit of a theme, is the vulnerability. And, I heard that when you said that Matt knew your history, Jen, when you guys went into marriage, which is good. But you also said that, there was this kind of dance of, not wanting to be vulnerable, or maybe not necessarily not wanting to be, but maybe not even realizing that you weren't being fully vulnerable throughout the marriage. And so, as that happens, it's difficult. And then I love that you said you guys both went to counseling and got better yourselves individually, because it kind of takes you back to that old adage of, if you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else, or no one else is going to love you, kind of a thing. And so, I love that you both took that seriously, and that, you took it seriously at 19 years of marriage. I mean, or whatever the timeline was at that point when you decided to do that. But you had stuck it out, so to speak, for so long that it was, we've got to keep pushing. So, I mean, first of all, congratulations on 25 years. That is
Thank you.
An amazing feat. And, with a story like that, there's even more weight to it. And so, tell me a little bit about the vulnerability side of that. I mean, you went into your marriage knowing what was going on. I'm sure there's a lot of couples who have similar stories that go into their marriage not knowing that information about their spouse because the vulnerability is scary to open up to someone. Can you speak a little on that?
Yeah, sure. Right. And I was very young. I was 18, almost 19 when we got married. Matt was 21, so much older and wiser than me.
Right.
We were babies. And like I said, I had shared what I could share about my story with Matt. But frankly, I really didn't even have the words to share the fullness of it, because I couldn't even face that myself.
Okay.
And I think that was really what held me back, is because I myself couldn't even really comprehend and understand the damage that had been done. The horrible, horrible thing about sexual abuse is that the shame often falls on the victim versus the perpetrator.
Right.
And so I had cloaked myself with so much shame that I thought the only way to soothe that shame was just to kind of hide in silence. And I knew that I needed to share at least some of that with Matt. I wanted him to know me and know all of me. But it was very difficult when I didn't even know myself.
Right.
Well, I think that's an important point that she had shared. And so we felt like, well, since I know and she knows that I know, well, now we know. And so it's in the past. And so now we'll
just love each other enough that this will go away.
But we didn't understand the depth that impacted her and us, and how we were relating to one another, and all of the coping mechanisms that she had developed to survive that trauma. All those coping mechanisms were damaging and also creating barriers between us. And again, barriers that we didn't recognize, barriers that she didn't recognize. Barriers. We knew that there had to be something better. We were stagnating sort of in our daily walk. Again, we had a great marriage, and lots of people respected us in our community, in the church, in my job. Lots of people respected us and even thought that our marriage was fantastic, but we knew that there was something missing, that there was something that could be better.
Right. And I think really what kind of led to the change was that knowledge that this could be better, that good could become great. But I was terrified of that. I was terrified of the idea of change, because I knew it would require more vulnerability. And, it felt comfortable and safe behind my wall. It didn't hurt, I thought. What I didn't realize is the level of pain I was dealing with behind my wall. And that once we finally sought the help, we sought help, we took those steps together to say, okay, how can this become better? Then I recognized that when I tore down those walls and really let him in, when I really became known, when I really finally looked at myself for who I really was, what had happened to me, I was able to then put that in a better place within my own heart, that it didn't control me. And then I could become intimate. I could become vulnerable with him. Wow, that felt so much better, and it kills me to think that for 19 years, I missed out on what it felt to truly be intimate in all ways, not just physically, but emotionally, and mentally, with my beloved, and to really be known.
So we're making up for lost time now.
That's good news. That's good news.
Yeah.
Something I want to ask that just kind of came to my mind is, in a situation like this, or any traumatic situation, I think there have to be some red flags that you guys have seen that might stand out to someone if they're walking through a situation with their spouse like this, of where Matt, you mentioned just getting stagnant, and some of that is just a lot of stuff that we talk about on our podcast is just your routine is messed up, or things like that. You just kind of have to get back to normal. But then there's some things that are so much deeper, on a deeper level, like what you have experienced. What are some red flags that you maybe have noticed that are this is deeper than just our schedule being off, or one of us is working too late, or we're under extra stress at a job, or, the kids, cause these schedule
Yeah.
conflicts or whatever.
Sure.
What are some red flags you've seen that relate to those deeper topics where you say, okay, I'm seeing this symptom or this thing, we need to seek external help from a professional to kind of work through this?
Yeah, good question. And I would say, I think whether there's trauma or not in your relationship, or past trauma, or whether you think that you have trauma in your past or not, there still are red flags that would suggest that it's more than just a little extra stress here or there that's damaging the relationship, or scheduling conflict or whatever. I think one important thing, at least though, as it pertains to trauma, is that if there is something in your past that still causes you anxiety from time to time, that's something that needs to be dealt with.
Okay.
And if the way that you're dealing with it is not alleviating that anxiety, then some professional help would go a long way to helping you work through it. And that's definitely a sign that there's something there that you need to work out.
Right. I mean, for me, there would be triggers that would come up out of the blue, and all of a sudden I would be remembering things that I didn't choose to remember in those moments. And I felt very out of control of my own thoughts and afraid of triggers. And so I felt like I kind of always was walking on eggshells because I never knew where the next trigger would be. In hindsight, one of the red flags was that when that would happen, I would pull way inward and I would distance myself from him. I wouldn't share, what had happened to cause a trigger. I would feel a sense of kind of anger and frustration at my own self. Like, why are you thinking about this? Why can't you just get over this? But that would put me in a place of more silence. And I would say to anybody that feels like when, that maybe has suffered trauma, when there's that sense of that the answer is just silence, that's a huge red flag that actually you need to talk to someone. And I was terrified of counseling. I think in the back of my mind, I always thought, well, counseling is just, they're going to sit me down and they're going to make me immediately tell all the things that had happened to me. And I can't even tell that to myself. Why would I tell that to a stranger?
Right.
And yet when I walked into that counseling office, I was met with an individual who just wanted me to just start learning who I was and helped me see that I had control over my thoughts. It wasn't until way into the counseling session that she even started sort of exploring the edges of what had actually happened.
Okay.
And so I tell that to people all the time, like, if there's trauma, don't think that the answer is just, if I can just say it, then I'll get over the trauma. Because really what needs to happen is you need someone that will help professionally lead you through the process of knowing how to look at those things that have happened and put them in the right place within your mind and in your heart, to where they're not controlling you and you have control over your own thoughts. So,
and that can open a doorway then to be able to communicate and live with your spouse in a much fuller way.
Yeah.
But whether or not there's trauma in your life, I think some really important red flags is if you're having the same kinds of arguments or conflict, and you're never coming to any kind of management of that conflict or resolution. Now, you're always going to have kids, so you're always going to fight about kids. You're always going to have different degrees of sexual desire, so you're always going to have conflict about that. But when those things are becoming unmanageable, or they're constantly unmanageable, that's when it is helpful to sometimes bring in a third party who can help navigate those conversations, because usually what you're fighting about is not really what you're fighting about.
Right.
What you're fighting about is on the surface, and that's the manifestation. But at the deeper level, there's some way that you're missing how you relate to this other person, how you're communicating, how you're relating, how you're hiding, and how you're avoiding sometimes the places of conflict. And so that's where a professional can help you see that deepest layer
Mhm.
that can help smooth out not just what you're fighting about here, but what you're fighting about in a much more general sense as well.
Gotcha. That's great. And let's talk a little bit about Intimate Covenant, the name. Tell me about that. I mean, you've told me kind of how it started. How did you get the name, and what does it mean to you? And I guess, what's kind of your mission, your goal there,
Great.
going
So
forward to help other people?
yeah, I mean, obviously there's kind of there's two words, obviously, intimate covenant. And we didn't choose it to be confusing, but sometimes it is a little bit confusing. One of the reasons we chose the word intimate is because that word intimacy or being intimate is used, unfortunately, as a euphemism for sex.
Mhm.
And what one of the reasons I chose intimate in the name of our mission is to help kind of break that down. But really what we're getting at with intimate is oneness.
Mhm.
What we're looking for is intimacy in every realm, not just sexually, but intimacy in terms of that vulnerability, that oneness, that closeness, that should be present in our marriage relationship. So that's why we chose the term intimate.
Right.
And then, of course, covenant comes from, obviously, the spiritual idea that marriage is more than just a partnership. It's more than just a tax benefit. It's more than just a baby making factory, but it is a covenant from God, ordained and established by God, and it's an agreement. Certainly, it is a contract, if you will, in some sense, but it's much more sacred than that.
Mhm.
Well, and covenant implies that this is the choice that I have made to give all, regardless of what the other does or doesn't. With a contract, if he doesn't uphold his end, then great, my contract is canceled, I'm out.
Mhm.
But covenant carries so much more weight, because covenant is saying, I choose you. I
Mhm.
choose to love and serve you. And
Mhm.
I choose that regardless of what you do tomorrow.
Right.
And so I think together, having that, the intimacy of truly knowing and being known by one another, when we have that foundation of our covenant, of a shared covenant, that's powerful. That is a marriage that withstands so much more, and is not sidetracked by all those little conflicts that will come up.
Well,
So,
and there's some strength in that word, covenant, like you were
yeah.
just explaining, Jen, that it's. I love the analogy used about the contract or the agreement. I mean, the other side of that is I mean, your contract could be canceled, but you can also uphold it. You can choose to say no. You need to uphold your end of the bargain, and
Yeah.
that covenant kind of wipes that away and says, like, I'm not going to hold you to a specific standard other than who you are. I'm just going to choose to be there with you, alongside of you. A covenant is more of a walking together type of thing, rather
Right.
than partnering,
Right.
like you said. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
And a covenant requires relationship.
right.
I don't have a covenant with the guy who sold me my
Right.
house, my car, right? Just a contract between us.
Yeah.
We sign our names and we have a contract, but I don't really care who he is or have any engagement with him.
Right.
But with a covenant, the covenant implies relationship and deep relationship and a walking together, as you put it. I think that's the idea.
Right.
That's great. I love that. So, after, 19 years of marriage on to 25. So I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but from an outsider's perspective, kind of hearing that story, I would think that once you got to that 19-year mark and you had that breakthrough, that almost maybe felt like you started over. You started fresh.
Yes.
You were newlyweds at that point. Even though you had been married
Yes.
for 19 years, you were actually newlyweds because you had this deeper relationship that you could actually explore. So tell me, we've talked about some of the red flags and things like that, which I feel like from your story are probably more in that first 19 years. But from that 19 to 25, what what are some things that, you would say are some good pieces of advice that you could give to someone who's just starting out? I mean, you've got this 25 years of experience, which is awesome, but you've also got this uniqueness of the last 6 years have been really kind of that newlywed time frame, to some extent. I mean, obviously this is a a big kind of ball of yarn situation, right? Of how do you connect the different pieces here and there, but if you can kind of make a dividing line and look at the black and whiteness of that, what would you kind of give us some advice from that point?
Well, and I love that you're bringing that out, because actually there is a moment, and we were on a little weekend getaway together to this itty bitty cabin in like the middle of nowhere, Texas. We just needed to get away for a little weekend, and that was the weekend that everything changed, and that little cabin was yellow. And so we talk about our marriage before the yellow cabin and after the yellow cabin, because yes, the last 6 years of our marriage are very different. Really, I think for us, where we really recognized that we had been missing one another and was in the sexual realm of our marriage. What I had to learn was that the place that I had been wounded the deepest was also the place where I could experience joy beyond comprehension.
Right.
And when we did the work of healing ourselves, and of healing our marriage, I think everything changed then, especially our sexual relationship. And we finally started seeing that sex was so much more than icing on a cake in marriage. That sex was the eggs that held the cake together, and for too long we had sat the sexual part of our marriage off to the side. It was great when it worked, and oh well when it didn't, even though it really wasn't oh well, right? It really caused a lot of conflict.
Sure.
And so I think that's that's where Intimate Covenant has kind of found its wheelhouse. We kind of started out really talking about just marriage principles in general, but we were very willing to talk about the sexual aspect of marriage in a way that others, especially within faith-based groups within the church, had not. And that's really there was kind of a pivotal moment where we recognized, okay, this is where God is calling us to speak most.
The more we talked about it, the more people wanted to talk about it, because they had no other safe place to ask some of the questions that they wanted to ask.
Right.
They couldn't go to their preacher's wife or the elders or pastors at their churches with these questions. At least they didn't feel like they could.
They should, but they didn't feel like they could, because too long the church has cloaked sexuality in so much silence and shame.
And thank God that that's getting better. There are good resources for people to talk about that now, so much more than there was even 5 years ago.
Right.
But that kind of became our wheelhouse, where that's kind of where we have focused, especially our podcast. Now, a lot of our other seminars and the retreats are not all sex focused, if you will, but that's been something that we just wanted to emphasize, at least with our podcast in particular.
And I think that's where we really, when we have the chance to speak into a brand new marriage or a young marriage, we're really trying to help them understand not just the technicalities of sex, but the meaning of sex. What did God have in mind? I mean, when you just look at sex, it's like, well, that's weird. What is that all about? But there's something so much greater and so much deeper to sex. And the fact that God himself prescribed that intimate relationship is meant to be had within a covenant. Why? Why is casual sex damaging? Why is sex within a covenant so much greater and so much better? And so we really try to work with young married couples all the way up to older than us, to just understand the beauty of sexuality, the holiness of sexuality.
And that it's not just an act, but sex is a relationship, and it should be a part of your relationship that is building connection. If you're not feeling more connected after sex, then you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And so that's I think one important thing that we have learned. I think another important thing that we've learned is the idea of embracing conflict,
Mm-hmm.
which feels like an oxymoron or this great paradox, but learning to embrace conflict as an opportunity to learn more about your spouse.
Right.
Whatever you're having conflict over is because your spouse wants something different than what you want. And instead of trying to win the argument, instead back up and try to focus on, what can I learn about my spouse in this moment? What are they telling me that they need? And how can I serve them better because of this conflict? So embrace it, have the argument, have the conversation, have the fight, if you will. There's maybe better ways to do that than others, but have the fight but with the intention of, what can I learn about my spouse, instead of how can I get what I want?
Right. I love that. I think that's huge. I mean, you just opened up a whole different podcast episode with that one, because I mean that really gets into all different levels of communication and conflict resolution and things like that. Maybe it's 2 episodes. But yeah, I mean, you're right, and all of those things do kind of go hand in hand. And one thing that I'm seeing that I hope our listeners will see is that you guys have this focus on sex, but you also have this focus on intimacy, and that it's such a difficult concept because they go hand in hand, but they're such very different things. Like, you have to have both in your marriage together. You have to have them working together, but they're 2 absolutely different things that they really don't happen at the same exact time, right?
Exactly right.
You
can definitely have sex without intimacy,
right? Well, and I would almost say that the act of sex is, although it is intimate during that moment, you're not focused on the intimacy.
You're pulling in. You're right.
Where the intimacy comes in. And
exactly
so
right.
And so
and it's learning to see that beautiful balance and that beautiful dance together of, when our focus in sex is connection and pleasure is the byproduct of that, then when we're each individually in those moments of deep pleasure and those moments of really actually pulling in, focusing on myself, the foundation of that, though, is this focus on myself is connection with him.
Because it's shared. It becomes shared, and that becomes the focus.
Yeah. But it's learning how to then take that and talk about it.
Yeah, we like to say that afterglow is really the best part of sex.
Right.
It's not orgasm. The best part of sex is afterglow.
Right.
Right. Because that's the moments when you are the most exposed, the most vulnerable. Now, frequently we like to, clothe ourselves, clean up and get in bed and scroll Facebook.
Because that vulnerability is, it feels scary.
Yeah.
But if you can embrace that uncomfortableness of the vulnerability and that afterglow, then you have a place where you're really building connection. And I think that's really where the focus ought to be.
Right.
Yeah. That is great. I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I want to give you guys a minute to let people know how they can find you guys, because you have provided such a great resource in this episode. I want everyone all of our listeners, to be able to find you guys too.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So you can certainly reach us at our website, and that's kind of the most central place, intimatecovenant.com. We also have a weekly podcast. It's the Intimate Covenant Podcast, as you probably would guess.
Sure.
And we're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. So those are always good places to catch up with us as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping in and helping me and my wife out this episode. We really appreciate it. This has been a huge blessing for us, and I really hope it's a huge blessing for our listeners, because there was so much great value that the 2 of you just shared. But thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
God bless you and your wife as well. Good luck with everything. I know you've got some anxious few weeks and months ahead. So
we'll be holding you close in our prayers.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much for being here. If this is your first time, thanks for checking out the Marriage Puzzle podcast. Make sure you go follow us on social media at Marriage Puzzle. And you can go check out our website, marriagepuzzle.com. And as you heard in the beginning of the episode, Julie and I are marriage coaches. We'd love to have the opportunity to interact with you on a couple-to-couple level. So you can go to our website and schedule a free discovery call with us, and we can see what we can do to help out your marriage. And as always, we look forward to you joining us next week, where together we'll work on a marriage one puzzle piece at a time. See you later.